sweetheart. I made your tea the way you like it." My mother set the mug down in front of me, and she was smiling the way she always smiled. Soft, patient, the kind of smile that made strangers think she was the most devoted woman alive. She did not know I had already read the text on her phone. She did not know I had seen it 3 hours ago, when she left it face up on the kitchen counter and walked to the garage. She did not know I had stood there in my socks on the cold tile floor, reading a message from my brother that said, "Just do it tonight. Add enough, and she won't wake up. The policy pays out in 90 days and we split it clean." I did not throw the mug. I did not cry. I looked at the tea, then I looked at my mother, and I said, "Actually, I made myself a coffee. You should have it. You've been so tired lately." But before I tell you what happened next and what I had hidden underneath the kitchen table the entire time, drop a comment and tell me, what is the one thing a family member did to you that you forgave too quickly and should never have? I need to read your answers, because I think more of us are sitting at that table than anyone wants to admit. I have lived in the same house in Barrie my whole life. The same house where my parents brought me home from the hospital. The same house where I learned to ride a bike in the driveway. Where I did my homework at the kitchen table. Where I cried through my first breakup on the basement couch. When my dad passed quietly in his sleep 2 years ago, November, the house became a kind of anchor. Not a happy one. Just the thing that kept us from drifting apart entirely. I am 31. I am a project coordinator at a small civil engineering firm. I pay my bills on time. I cook. I call. I show up. My brother is 34. He has not held a job for longer than 8 months in the last decade. He lives 40 minutes north in a place he rents under a name I think belongs to a girlfriend or an ex-girlfriend. I was never totally clear. He is charming the way a salesperson is charming. You feel good when he is talking to you, and you feel vaguely cheated afterward. And you were never quite sure what just happened. When my dad died, he cried harder than anyone at the funeral. I noticed that too. After the service, the lawyer sat us down. My dad had been careful with money his whole life. Worked 30 years at Ontario Power Generation. Saved, invested modestly, never flashy. There was a house worth just under $800,000, a TFSA, some RRSPs, and a life insurance policy. My mother was primary beneficiary on everything. But my dad had left one thing specifically to me, the house, not to be sold, to be lived in or managed, with a clause that said it could not be transferred without my consent for 10 years. My brother did not say anything in the lawyer's office. He shook the lawyer's hand, hugged my mother on the way out, and told me the service was beautiful. 3 weeks later, he moved back into the house. He said it was temporary. He said he needed to help Mom through her grief. He said it with such sincerity that I almost felt ashamed for feeling suspicious. I told myself I was being uncharitable. I told myself grief does strange things to people. I told myself he was trying. I told myself that for 14 months. By the time I finally stopped, it was because I had a spreadsheet. I have always been the one with the spreadsheets. I track things. It is a habit from work and a habit from growing up in a house where nothing was ever written down and everyone remembered events differently, and somehow I was always the one who had it wrong. I started the spreadsheet in February. By May, it had 43 rows. The mortgage, which was paid off when my dad died, had been refinanced. I found out when I pulled the property records because I wanted to know the assessed value for insurance purposes. My name was not on the mortgage. It had been done in my mother's name only, which was legal because the house was technically hers to live in. But no one had told me. The refinance had been done 9 months after my dad's funeral, when my mother was still in the foggy half-present state that grief leaves, and my brother was the one who drove her to the bank and helped her sign the paperwork. I found this out on a Tuesday. I did not call my brother. I pulled the refinance documents through a title search and sat with them for a long time. Then I kept going. The TFSA had been drawn down by 2/3. My mother had no memory of withdrawing from it. She told me this when I asked, carefully, gently, framing it as me helping her track her finances. She thought maybe she had moved it somewhere else. She could not remember. She seemed confused and a little frightened and very eager to change the subject. My brother had power of attorney. She had given it to him 6 months after my dad died because, she told me, she was having trouble focusing and he had been so helpful and it was just easier. I stared at my spreadsheet on a Thursday evening in June, sitting in my car in the parking lot of a No Frills, because I needed somewhere that was not my apartment and not that house. I sat with the engine off and I worked through what I was looking at. My mother had a life insurance policy. She had taken it out years ago, back when my dad was still alive, and they were being responsible and planning ahead. It was a $500,000 policy. My brother had been added as a secondary beneficiary at some point in the last 18 months. My mother did not bring this up when we talked. I found it in a document in her filing cabinet while she was at a church group meeting and I was helping tidy up the office. I did not take anything. I photographed everything. I had 51 photographs on my phone by the time I drove home. The question I was sitting with was this. My mother was 63 and she was not sick. She was physically healthy. She had her annual physicals. She gardened. She walked the neighborhood every morning with the woman across the street. She was forgetful sometimes, and she was grieving, and she was lonely, and she leaned on my brother too much. But she was not sick. So a payout would require something to happen to her. I told myself I was catastrophizing. I told myself I was building a conspiracy out of paperwork and grief and the complicated feelings I'd always had about my brother. I told myself that for 6 weeks. Then one afternoon, I came over for dinner and I noticed something on the counter. My mother takes a blood thinner. She's taken it since her early 50s. A minor clotting issue her doctor found during routine blood work. Nothing dramatic, just a prescription she refills every 90 days and takes with breakfast every morning. She has a weekly pill organizer with a flower on it that she keeps next to the coffee maker. The pill organizer was not next to the coffee maker. I found it in the bathroom cabinet when I went to get an aspirin for a headache. 2 weeks of the blood thinner compartments had been emptied out in a row. Not taken. Emptied. I could tell because she organizes meticulously. She refills the whole tray at once on Sunday evenings, and the capsules that replaced them were visually different, smaller. A different off-white. I stood in the bathroom with the organizer in my hand, and I felt something go very still inside me. I put the organizer back exactly as I found it. I went to the kitchen and said my headache was worse and I was going to skip dinner and head home. My mother hugged me at the door. My brother, who was on the couch watching a game, lifted one hand without looking up. I sat in my car in their driveway for 4 minutes. Then I drove to a pharmacy 2 neighborhoods over, not the one my family used, and I asked the pharmacist, quietly, what would happen if someone on a blood thinner stopped taking their medication and was given something else instead. I did not frame it as anything sinister. I said I was asking about a hypothetical for a relative who might be mixing up her medications. The pharmacist walked me through it. Stopping a blood thinner without medical supervision was serious. The risks depended on the individual. But a clotting event, a stroke, a pulmonary embolism was a real possibility. It could look like a natural medical event. It would likely look like a natural medical event in a 63-year-old woman with a known clotting history. I thanked her. I got back in my car. I did not go to the police yet. I know that sounds like the wrong choice, but here is the truth. I had pill organizer photographs and a financial spreadsheet and a pharmacist's hypothetical. I had a brother who had power of attorney and was a secondary beneficiary on a life insurance policy. None of that was a crime I could hand someone. What I needed was something that was not a maybe. I went to Best Buy the next morning. I bought a small Bluetooth speaker, the kind that sits on a shelf and looks like decor. Inside the packaging was a separate device I had ordered online, a small audio recorder with 30-hour battery life that could be triggered remotely. It was marketed toward people who needed to record work meetings. I set it on the shelf in the kitchen between a small plant and a cookbook stand. I told my mother I thought she'd love the speaker for the kitchen. She said it was thoughtful. I spent 4 days listening to nothing more interesting than my mother on the phone with her friend from church, the weather, the news, and my brother asking her what was for dinner. On the 5th day, I was at my desk at work when the app on my phone flagged a voice activation event. I put in my earbuds. My brother was on the phone. He was pacing. I could hear the floorboards, the rhythm of it, the particular creak near the window that I had heard my whole life. The person on the other end spoke first. She's still taking the replacements? Yeah, my brother said. She doesn't notice. She just grabs whatever's in the tray. A pause. And how long? Doc said. The thing I read said, it depends on the person. Could be weeks. Could be less if she's active. She's still doing those morning walks? My brother's voice was flat. Every day. I sat at my desk, and I did not move for what felt like a very long time. My coworker said something to me that I did not hear. Someone's phone rang. The office kept moving around me in the normal, unremarkable way that offices move, and I was sitting perfectly still in the middle of it, listening to my brother discuss the timeline for his mother's death. I took the rest of the day off. I told them I had a family situation. That was not a lie. There were two things I needed to do, and I needed to do them in the right order. The first was to get into that house and replace the pills in my mother's organizer before she had another morning without her actual medication. The second was to get something on tape that was not two men discussing ambiguous timelines. I drove to the house. My mother was on her walk. My brother's truck was not in the driveway. I let myself in with my key. I went to the bathroom cabinet. I photographed the replacement pills, close up, with a date stamp enabled on my phone. Then I took them. I dropped them into a small evidence bag I had bought at a dollar store. I know that sounds dramatic, but I was thinking clearly about chain of custody, which is a phrase I knew from reading too many true crime articles at 2 in the morning. I replaced them with her actual prescription, which I had picked up for her the week before, and which was still in a paper pharmacy bag on the counter. I set the organizer back. I wiped down the bathroom cabinet. I left. My mother came home from her walk 20 minutes later. I was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 cups of tea, and I told her I had taken the morning off and thought I would come by. She was so happy to see me. I think about that a lot. How uncomplicated her happiness was. How she just lit up. We had tea. We talked about the neighbor's new dog and a book she was reading and how she wanted to redo the garden bed along the fence. She did not mention my brother. She did not mention money. She did not mention her pills. When I left, I hugged her for a long time at the door, and I told her I loved her. She said she loved me too, and to drive safe. I cried in my car for about 10 minutes. Then I drove home and made a list of everything I needed. The thing about what I was planning was that it required my brother to say something specific to me, in my presence, in a way that was recordable and unambiguous. I could not manufacture that. I could only create conditions that made it likely. I called him that evening. I told him I needed to talk to him about Mom's finances. I said I had been looking at things and I was worried, and I wanted us to sit down together and go through everything. He said he was glad I brought it up. He said he had been worried about the same things. He said, let's do dinner Sunday and we can talk it through. His voice was easy and warm and not worried at all. Sunday, I came for dinner. I had a small recorder in the pocket of my cardigan, a different one from the kitchen device, a flat clip that looked like a button. I had charged it fully. I had tested it twice. My mother made her pasta bake, the one with the 3 cheeses that she has made since I was 12. It smelled like every family dinner I had ever eaten in that house, and I felt something complicated and painful in my chest the entire time I sat there. After dinner, my mother went to watch television. My brother and I stayed at the table. He poured himself more wine. He said, "So what are you worried about?" I said I had pulled the property records and seen the refinance, and I wanted to understand what had been borrowed and why. His expression shifted slightly. Nothing dramatic. A small recalibration. Mom needed some cash flow, he said. I helped her access the equity. She understood what she was signing. She told me she didn't remember it, I said. She's grieving, he said. She forgets things. I kept my voice even. I said I had also noticed the TFSA withdrawals, and I was trying to get a full picture. He said the money had been moved into something else. He said he could get me the details. Then I said quietly, and I noticed the pills in her organizer aren't her prescription. There was a silence that lasted maybe 3 seconds. In that silence, I watched something happen behind his eyes. A calculation. The same kind of calculation I had watched my brother do my whole life when he was deciding which version of himself to present. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. I took them, I said. The replacements. I have them. I also have the audio from the kitchen. He looked at me without speaking. I heard you on the phone, I said. 5 days ago, the whole conversation. What I expected? Denial? Escalation? Maybe him leaving the table. What happened? He laughed. A short, quiet exhale of something that might have been disbelief and might have been contempt. You're paranoid, he said. You've always been paranoid. This is Elena. You're building something out of nothing. He said my name. I caught that. He was so rattled, he used my name instead of whatever he had been calling me in his head. My name is not Elena, I said, and you know that. He stopped. The recording has your voice, I said, and someone else's, talking about her walks, talking about the timeline. I have photographs of the pills with date and timestamps. I have a pharmacist who I spoke to on record about the effects of what was in that organizer. I have the financial documents, all of it. My brother looked at the table. His hand was wrapped around the wine glass and his knuckles had gone pale. "What do you want?" he said. It was not a question. "I want to give you a choice," I said. "The same kind of choice you were going to give Mom, except mine comes with options." I put my phone on the table between us. I pulled up the voice memo app and showed him it was recording. "Option A," I said. "You walk out of this house tonight. You remove yourself from the power of attorney, which I have already drafted. The forms are ready. I will bring them tomorrow. You cooperate with whatever process follows, and I do not play that recording to the RCMP tonight." He said nothing. "Option B," I said. "I walk into that living room right now. I tell Mom exactly what I found, and I call the non-emergency line while you're still sitting here." He stared at me. I think he was waiting for me to flinch. I have spent 31 years watching him wait for me to flinch. "You won't do that," he said. "You won't hurt her like that." "Telling her the truth is not hurting her," I said. "What you were doing was hurting her. I am just deciding which way she finds out." My mother laughed at something on the television in the next room. One of those laugh track shows she likes. We both heard it. My brother's jaw tightened. "If you go to the police," he said, "you destroy this family." "You already did that," I said. "I am just doing the paperwork. I want to be honest about what came next because I think people expect a clean ending, and that is not what real life gives you." My brother signed the power of attorney removal forms the next day. He did not do it gracefully. He did it in the driveway while refusing to look at me, signed where I indicated, and then got in his truck and drove away without saying goodbye to our mother. She watched from the front window, and when I came inside, she asked me what was going on, and I told her we needed to talk. That conversation was the hardest thing I have done in my adult life. Not because she did not believe me. She did. Once I showed her the recording. Once I walked her through the photographs. She sat at the kitchen table and listened and got very quiet. And then she cried, and then she stopped crying and asked me to bring her the pill organizer. She looked at it for a long time. Then she said, "I gave him that power of attorney because I trusted him." I said, "I know." She said, "I made him pasta every Sunday." I said, "I know." I went to the RCMP detachment 2 days later. I brought everything: the recording, the photographs, the pill samples in their dated evidence bag, the financial documents. The officer I spoke with was thorough and not unkind. She explained the process. She explained that investigation takes time. She explained that I had done the right thing by not confronting him alone without documentation. She also said that replacing the pills in my mother's organizer had potentially interrupted what could have been a very different outcome. My brother was charged. I am not going to list every charge because some of it is still moving through the system, and I was told to be careful about what I say publicly. What I can tell you is that the financial exploitation charges were clear and well documented. The rest is complicated in the way that cases involving family always are, because intent is harder to prove than paperwork. The person on the other end of that phone call has not been identified. My brother says he doesn't know who it was. The RCMP say they are working on it. My mother moved in with me for 3 months while things were getting sorted. She slept in my spare room with her flower pill organizer on the nightstand, and she made tea every morning, and she cried sometimes, and most of the time she did not. She started seeing a counselor through her church's outreach program. She called her friend across the street every other day. She kept walking. The house is still in the family, still complicated, still in my name technically, still something I am figuring out with a lawyer. I do not live in it. My mother has gone back to it now because she wanted to. She said she was not going to. She said she was not going to let him take that too. I understand that. The hardest part is not the legal process. The hardest part is the way grief compounds. I was already grieving my father. Now I am grieving the brother I thought I had, who turns out was never really that person, or was that person in pieces, and this other thing in other pieces. And I cannot sort out the memory of the kid who used to play street hockey with me in October from the man who sat at a kitchen table and did math on whether our mother was worth more alive or dead. I do not have a clean answer to that. I am working on it. What I know is this. I spent years in that house making myself useful because I thought love was something you earned through function. I thought if I showed up reliably enough, fixed things, paid things, remembered things. Eventually, that would be enough to make me matter. I thought the people who stayed without doing any of that were the ones who had something I lacked, a quality I hadn't figured out yet. I understand now that it wasn't a quality, it was leverage. The only reason I was not the one being managed was because I had learned, quietly, over many years, to document everything, to keep receipts, not out of suspicion, just out of a bone-deep instinct that told me the version of events that would be remembered might not be the true one, and I wanted to have something to point to. That instinct saved my mother's life. It might have saved mine eventually, in ways I don't fully know yet. There's a text from my brother on my phone from 3 weeks ago. He sent it at 11:40 at night. It says, "I hope you know what you've done." I read it once. I did not respond. I do know what I've done. I documented it carefully. I sat across from him at that kitchen table, and I gave him the only thing he had never given any of us, a choice. He didn't like his options. That's not something I can fix. So tell me, if you found something on someone's phone that changed everything, something that made you look at your whole family differently, what would you do? Would you confront them? Would you wait? Would you build your spreadsheet and keep your receipts? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And share this if you believe that protecting the people you love sometimes means being the calmest person in a very frightening room. I keep coming back to the pill organizer, the small plastic one with the flower on it that my mother refills every Sunday evening without fail. Sitting at the kitchen counter with her reading glasses on, pressing each capsule into its little slot. She has done that for years. It is one of those quiet rituals that nobody notices until it is the thing that almost ended her. What stopped it was not luck. I want to be clear about that. It was a habit I had carried so long I had forgotten it was even a habit. The habit of writing things down, of checking, of not accepting the version of events that was simply handed to me. I was not suspicious by nature. I was careful because I had learned, slowly and painfully over many years, that the people who love you most easily are not always the people who love you most truly. And the only way to know the difference is to pay attention even when it is uncomfortable. Especially then. There's something I think about a lot now. The fact that doing the right thing and doing the hard thing were exactly the same thing in this situation every single step of the way. Going to that pharmacy was hard. Replacing those pills without saying a word was hard. Sitting across from my brother at that dinner table, pasta cooling on the plate, and speaking in a steady voice while my hands wanted to shake, that was hard. None of it felt heroic in the moment. It felt like I was very tired and very frightened, and just trying not to make a mistake I could not take back. That steadiness, I think, is something you build. It does not arrive fully formed. It comes from the smaller, less dramatic moments when you choose to be honest, even when it costs you something, when you choose to think clearly, even when your emotions are screaming, when you choose to keep going, even when every part of you wants to just walk away and pretend you did not see what you saw. My brother counted on me not keeping going. He had been counting on that for years. What he did not understand, what I think people who operate the way he does never fully understand, is that the person who has been underestimated the longest has also had the longest time to prepare. My mother is back in her house now. She walks every morning. She refills her pill organizer on Sunday evenings with her reading glasses on. I called her last Tuesday and she spent 20 minutes telling me about a robin that built a nest in the garden bed along the fence. I am still figuring out how to hold both things at once. The grief of what my brother turned out to be, and the gratitude that I figured it out before it was too late. Some days that is easier than others. I do not think the two feelings cancel each other out. I think they just exist side by side, the way most hard truths do. What I know is that I did not save my mother by being fearless. I saved her by being honest about what I was seeing, smart enough to move carefully instead of impulsively, and stubborn enough not to stop. Those three things, working together, were the only reason any of this ended the way it did. You do not have to be extraordinary to protect someone you love. You just have to be willing to pay attention, think clearly, and not give up before the work is done.